They began calling me useless in front of guests. That was how I knew they had grown comfortable. Cruelty always starts in private. It graduates to public only when it believes no one will stop it. My daughter-in-law Sandra said it first at Easter. I was carrying deviled eggs into the dining room when she laughed and told her sister, "Careful, let Margaret set those down." It's nice she still likes feeling helpful. Still likes feeling helpful. I stood there with the tray in my hands and smiled the way women of my generation were trained to smile when insult arrived dressed as humor. My son Peter laughed too, not loudly, just enough. That hurt more. Peter used to cry if he saw injured birds. At 8, he once buried a squirrel in a shoebox and asked me whether heaven had trees. Now he laughed while his wife reduced me to decorative labor beside the ham. I set the eggs down and said nothing. People often mistake silence for weakness. Sometimes silence is inventory. I was 73 years old and lived in the small in-law suite attached to the rear of the family home. That is what everyone called it, the family home. Interesting phrase, because I had paid for most of it. 21 years earlier, after my husband Thomas died of a sudden heart attack in a hardware store parking lot, I sold our original house. Peter was newly married, overextended, and pretending adulthood came with income. He and Sandra wanted a larger property for future children. Banks were unconvinced, so I provided the down payment. A very large one. My savings, insurance payout, and the proceeds from the sale of the house Thomas, and I built room by room over 28 years. Peter cried when I offered it. Sandra cried too, though hers had calculation mixed in. "We'll all live together," she said. "You'll never be alone." A beautiful sentence. Expensive too. The deed was placed in Peter's name because it simplified financing. I was promised lifetime security, the rear suite, shared meals, and family closeness. I received a kitchenette, occasional leftovers, and annual reminders that I occupied space. At first it was subtle. "We're stretched thin this month. Utilities are crazy. You know groceries cost more now," then less subtle. "Could you contribute extra? Could you watch the kids all weekend? Could you skip using the dryer before 6? Then insulting. "You're lucky to be here. You don't know how hard we work. You wouldn't manage on your own." By the time the grandchildren were teenagers, I had become furniture that made tea. I know what you're thinking. Why stay? Because age changes mathematics. Starting over at 52 is courage. At 65, it is harder. At 73, every new beginning asks for knees, money, energy, and nerve all at once. And because Peter was still my son, mothers remain vulnerable to outdated versions of men. I still saw the boy with the shoebox squirrel, even when he stood before me discussing electricity costs in a golf shirt I had indirectly purchased. After Easter came June, my birthday, no cake. Sandra said everyone was busy. I made my own sponge cake and ate 2 slices with tea while hearing laughter from the patio where they hosted friends. Then August. My washing machine in the suite broke unexpectedly. Peter said replacing it wasn't practical. I was welcome to use the main house machine on Wednesdays between 10 and noon. Permission windows are a language of power. Then October. I found a printed spreadsheet on the kitchen island. Household cost review. My name appeared in a column. Suggested senior contribution increase. Senior. I had a name before spreadsheets. When I confronted Peter, he sighed the sigh of men burdened by their own convenience. "Mom, things are expensive. So is disrespect. Don't start." That phrase lived often in his mouth. Don't start. Meaning, do not object to what I have already decided. I returned to my suite and wrote a number on paper. $318,000, that was the approximate amount I had given 21 years earlier if adjusted conservatively. Down payment. Furniture. Roof repair 5 years later. Kitchen remodel loan Peter never repaid. Emergency tuition help for granddaughter Mia. Dental bills for grandson Kyle. The family home had my fingerprints in every wall. But no legal claim, or so they believed. Thomas, my husband, had once said something important. Never confuse what people know with what is true. At the time I thought he meant gossip. He meant paperwork. Thomas handled finances quietly, not secretive, simply methodical. He trusted me completely and trusted others by appointment only. When he died, grief made me sign many things too quickly, but not everything. That mattered later. The breaking point came in November at dinner. Sandra's brother and his wife were visiting. Roast chicken, candles, performance hospitality. Sandra complained about costs again. Peter mentioned taxes. Then Sandra laughed and said, "Honestly, if Margaret had any money of her own, life would be easier around here." Her brother chuckled. His wife looked embarrassed. Peter carved chicken. No objection, no correction, I placed down my fork. "I had money," I said calmly. "You live in it." Silence. Sandra smiled thinly. "Oh, Margaret, we all know you helped a little." A little. There are insults so elegant they deserve framing. Peter finally spoke. "Mom, nobody wants to argue." "Then do not host lies," I nearly said. Instead I stood, took my plate, and returned to my suite. I did not cry. I opened the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Inside were winter blankets, Thomas's scarf, old photographs, and a metal document box. I had not opened it in years. Inside lay insurance policies, certificates, letters, and one envelope marked in Thomas's handwriting. "For Margaret, if gratitude expires." I sat down slowly. My husband had a gift for timing beyond death. Inside were two sealed envelopes. One marked, "Give first to family lawyer." The second marked, "Only after they show themselves." I laughed so suddenly tears came. Thomas, even dead, was still waiting for evidence before acting. The next morning I called the number printed on the first envelope. Arthur Levin and Associates. A younger voice answered. "Good morning, Levin Legal." I said, "This may sound odd, but my dead husband appears to have left instructions for your office." There was a pause. Then the woman asked, very carefully, "Was your husband Thomas Bennett?" "Yes." Another pause. "Mrs. Bennett, we've been wondering when you might call." I nearly dropped the phone. I was invited in that same afternoon. The office sat downtown above an insurance agency and below a dentist, which seemed exactly where serious secrets would live. Levin Legal occupied the third floor with modest carpeting, framed certificates, and the scent of paper older than most marriages. A receptionist in navy glasses stood when I entered. "Mrs. Bennett?" "Yes," her expression softened unexpectedly. "Mr. Levin spoke of you." "That is impressive," I said. "He died 11 years ago," she smiled. "His son runs the practice now." I was shown into a conference room where a man in his 40s rose to greet me. Tall, neat, careful eyes. The kind of man who notices watches, pauses, and unsigned pages. "Daniel Levin," he said. "My father represented your husband for many years." I shook his hand. "He was a difficult man," I said. He was delighted by that. We sat. I placed the first envelope on the table. He examined the handwriting and nodded immediately. "That's Thomas." No one mistakes the handwriting of organized men. Even their loops looked judgmental. Daniel opened the envelope with professional caution. Inside were copies of old transfer records, a typed memorandum signed by his father, and a short handwritten note from Thomas. Daniel read silently for a full minute. Then he looked up at me with something close to admiration. "Your husband was extraordinary. I knew that occasionally." He turned the memorandum toward me. "21 years ago, when you sold your marital home and funded Peter's purchase. Your husband insisted several protections be prepared in case your contribution was later denied." My heartbeat changed pace. "Protections?" "Yes," he tapped the page. "A private loan agreement secured by equitable interest." Those words meant little to me. My face must have shown it. He smiled slightly. "In plain language, the money you gave Peter was documented as a callable family loan tied to the property, not a gift." I stared. "That can't be right." "Peter said the bank needed it treated as a gift." Daniel nodded. "To the bank, the funds were declared available for closing. Separately, your husband had a private agreement executed afterward." "Executed afterward. Thomas, two-track man. Peter signed?" "Yes," I sat back. My son had signed papers acknowledging my money as a loan. then spent 21 years behaving as if I should be grateful for storage. Daniel continued. The original principal was $270,000, with optional forgiveness at your discretion. Optional? I laughed once sharply. How generous of me. However, he said, tapping another paragraph, if at any point you were displaced, neglected, financially coerced, or publicly denied as contributing party, the forgiveness clause automatically voided. The room went still. I read the line myself. There it was, typed in black, publicly denied as contributing party. I thought of Sandra saying helped a little. I thought of Peter carving chicken. I thought of 21 years. How much now? I asked. Daniel had prepared for that question. He slid a printed sheet across the table. Conservative accrued balance with low-interest assumptions. $612,440. I removed my glasses, cleaned them, put them back on. Still $612,000. That seems rude, I said. He laughed. It is lawful. I looked at him carefully. Can this be enforced? Yes. Will it destroy my son? He paused before answering. It may confront him. Good lawyer. I asked the next question softly. What else did Thomas leave? Daniel's eyes moved to the second sealed envelope in my handbag. That, I suspect, is where he became entertaining. I placed it on the table. Only after they show themselves. Daniel actually smiled. May I? I nodded. He opened it. Inside were 3 items, a notarized letter, a key, and a second memorandum. Daniel read the first page and blinked, then read it again. What? He looked up. Your husband created a small trust account in your name 11 years ago, unknown to Peter. Unknown to Peter sounded melodic. How small? Daniel checked the page. Not small. He turned the statement toward me. Market-adjusted current value, $487,000. I laughed so hard I scared myself. Thomas, that sly, magnificent man. I had spent years being treated as broke, while nearly $500,000 waited politely in legal custody. How? Sale proceeds from business shares he never disclosed to the children, Daniel said. My father administered them quietly. I sat back in stunned silence. There are moments when humiliation reverses direction so quickly it creates wind. Daniel continued. The trust also contains instructions. Of course it does, he read aloud. If Margaret is comfortable and respected, disclose at her convenience. If she is treated as burden, disclose immediately and bill them for parking. I covered my mouth. That was his exact wording, Daniel nodded. My father added in pen, do not edit client humor. I cried then, not from sadness, from being loved by a man who planned beyond his lifespan. Daniel handed me tissues and the second memorandum. This one concerned the property. If loan default is declared, he explained, you may place a lien, force repayment, negotiate buyout, or compel sale. I imagined Sandra's dining room candles. I imagined her spreadsheet. I imagined Peter saying things are expensive. Yes, I said quietly, they are. Daniel folded his hands. What would you like to do? That is the first real question I had been asked in years. I looked out the conference room window at wet rooftops and moving traffic. I would like, I said slowly, to host Sunday lunch. He blinked. That's possible. I want everyone there. Children, spouses, grandchildren. I see. I'd like you present. As counsel, as theater. He considered this, then nodded. When? This Sunday, he made notes. I left the office lighter by several decades. On the drive home, I bought myself a cashmere coat I did not need. Then I purchased pastries too expensive to justify. Wealth should stretch its legs gently after confinement. At home, Sandra met me in the driveway. Where have you been? I looked at her. Out being useless. She frowned. We need to talk about increasing your contribution starting January. Wonderful, I said. Let's do it Sunday at lunch. She seemed pleased. Predators often mistake invitations for advantage. That night Peter knocked on my suite door. Mom, yes. Everything okay? I opened only halfway. Perfectly, he shifted awkwardly. About dinner last night. Sandra didn't mean anything. She meant several things. She gets stressed. So do bridges, he sighed. You know we do our best. No, I said. I know you do what's easiest. He looked wounded. Good, wounds sometimes admit medicine. Come Sunday, I said, bring everyone hungry. Then I closed the door. Inside, I sat on the bed and touched Thomas's old scarf. Still rescuing me, I whispered. Somewhere beyond paperwork and death, I hope he was unbearably pleased. I spent Saturday preparing like a woman hosting war with napkins. Not because I intended cruelty, because presentation matters. When people have dismissed you for years, truth should arrive well-plated. I ordered fresh flowers for the dining room. White lilies Sandra considered wasteful. Excellent start. I arranged the good china I had purchased long before she learned the phrase neutral palate. I asked Mia, my granddaughter, to come early and help me bake. She arrived at 9 carrying flour, gossip, and the expression of someone relieved to be summoned privately. Mia was 21, studying nursing, and far kinder than the household that raised her deserved. Grandma, she whispered while tying an apron, Mom says tomorrow you're announcing something dramatic. I hope to exceed expectations. She laughed, then glanced toward the main house. Are you okay? Yes, I said. I have recently become very okay. We baked lemon tart, roasted vegetables, and a chicken large enough to humble appetites. I paid a caterer to deliver 2 additional dishes anonymously because age teaches strategic abundance. At noon, Kyle wandered in. 19, headphones around neck, shoulders permanently defensive. Mom says don't use Grandma's oven, he muttered. It appears to be defying orders, I said. He smirked despite himself. Children know nonsense when not yet fully invested in it. Can I help? He asked. I handed him potatoes. Young men can peel their way toward morality. By 3, the house smelled of butter, time, and consequences. I moved through rooms I had once decorated and later been reduced to visiting in my own life. Strange how confidence restores geography. Sandra entered the kitchen at 4 carrying store-bought rolls in aggressive packaging. Oh, she said, seeing the spread. You really went all out. No, I replied. This is moderate. She set the rolls down too hard. You shouldn't overdo things at your age. You shouldn't underdo them at yours. She gave me the smile women reserve for enemies in front of witnesses. Peter came home behind her, kissed the air near my cheek, and asked whether the game would be on. No, the game would be at the table. By 5:30, everyone had arrived. Rebecca, my daughter, came with a bottle of wine and habitual lateness. Her husband Greg came with the expression of a man who had long ago surrendered interior territory. 2 cousins stopped by unexpectedly after Sandra invited them for atmosphere, which I appreciated more than she knew. The more witnesses, the cleaner the lesson. Daniel Levin arrived at 5:45 wearing a navy suit and carrying a slim briefcase. Sandra met him at the door. Can I help you? Yes, he said pleasantly. I'm here for lunch. At dinner, I'm an attorney, time is fluid. I nearly applauded from the kitchen. Peter approached, confused. Mom, who is this? My guest. You invited a lawyer? Yes. Why? Digestive support. The table was set for 10, candles lit, glasses polished, food abundant. Tension excellent, we sat. I placed Daniel between myself and Sandra. He had the calm manners of a man seated beside explosives professionally. Conversation began stiffly. Weather, tuition, fuel prices. Rebecca discussing property markets with the confidence of someone who did not know. I now found that topic comedic. Sandra mentioned costs 3 times before soup. Then, right on schedule, she sighed theatrically over the roast. With grocery prices now, feeding this many people is almost irresponsible. I looked at Daniel. He gave the smallest nod. Curtain up. You're right, I said warmly. Expenses deserve discussion. Peter relaxed visibly, believing I had joined the old script. Sandra smiled. Exactly. I set down my fork. So let's begin with household contributions. Silence. Forks paused. Kyle stopped chewing. Mia looked suddenly interested in adulthood. I continued. For 21 years, I have contributed down payment capital, renovation loans, childcare labor, emergency tuition support, appliance replacement. unpaid cooking, cleaning, pet sitting. And the emotional burden of pretending insults are jokes. Rebecca coughed into her wine. Sandra blinked. Peter forced a laugh. Mom, not now. No, I said. Now is perfect. Daniel opened his briefcase with the soft sound of panic entering the room. Sandra straightened. What is this? Documentation, I said. You'll enjoy the historical section. Peter looked at Daniel. Who are you exactly? Counsel for your mother. My mother doesn't need counsel. Your sentence disproves itself, Daniel said pleasantly. Even Greg laughed. I liked Greg more immediately. Daniel distributed copies. Loan agreement, acknowledgement signature, interest schedule, default clauses. Peter stared at the first page, then the second, then his own younger signature at the bottom. His face lost color by layers. What is this? You signed it, I said. I don't remember signing this. That does not void memory in ink. Sandra snatched her copy. This says the down payment was a loan. Yes, it was a gift. No, I said, it was trust, different category. Peter looked frantic now. Dad never said, your father said many things. You only retained convenient ones. Rebecca reached for another page. What's the total? Daniel answered before I could. Current enforceable balance, conservatively calculated, $612,440. The cousins made the involuntary sound people make near-car accidents. Sandra actually laughed. This is absurd. Daniel slid another document toward her. Default triggers include public denial of contribution, financial coercion, and displacement threats. Her smile faltered. Peter read, lips moving, then looked up sharply. This isn't legal. It is extremely legal, Daniel replied. You're trying to steal our house. I set down my napkin. No, Peter, I financed your house. We are merely reviewing ownership myths. Sandra stood. This is elder manipulation. Daniel looked delighted. Please say that again while I record. She sat down. Mia whispered, Grandma is savage. Kyle whispered back, I'm obsessed. Good grandchildren. Peter pushed back from the table. Mom, why are you doing this? That question fascinates me. As though consequences emerge naturally, but boundaries require explanation. Because last month your wife called me broke, Sandra snapped. I never. At Easter I was told I still liked feeling helpful. She flushed. At dinner I was called a little helper. Peter looked at Sandra. She looked at Peter. Excellent. Always redirect pressure toward source. I was joking, she said weakly. No, I replied. You were measuring safety. Daniel passed me another envelope, the trust disclosure. Second act, I smiled. And since we are discussing my poverty, I opened it slowly. Inside were statements, trust papers, and account balances. I handed the top page to Peter. He read once, then again. 487,000. Sandra lunged for the paper. Rebecca stood. What is that? My private trust, I said. Established by Thomas 11 years ago. Sandra's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I thought you said she had nothing, Rebecca said to Peter. I thought she did. There's our family motto, I said. I thought. The room had never been so quiet. Even the candles seemed attentive. Peter stood up so abruptly his chair struck the wall. This is insane. No, I said. This is accounting. He paced once behind his seat, hands in his hair the way he used to when algebra defeated him. You hid money. Interesting accusation from a man sitting inside hidden money. I preserved privacy, I replied, a skill absent in this house. Sandra found her voice first. So all this time while we were carrying you, I laughed. It startled even me. Carrying me? I turned to Mia. Who watched you every weekday from age 6 to 11? She pointed at me. Kyle, who picked you up when you were suspended in 10th grade, he grimaced. You, Rebecca, who lent Peter $40,000 after the roofing disaster, she blinked. You did. Peter stared at his plate. Greg muttered, I wondered where that came from. I continued. Who paid for Mia's first semester deposit when scholarships were delayed? Mia's eyes widened. Dad said he did. Your father says many things. Peter slammed both palms on the table. Can everyone stop attacking me? No one answered. That silence was earned. Sandra turned on him slowly. You told me your mother barely contributed. She was supposed to leave the money to us anyway. There it was. Ugly, clean, useful. The cousins exchanged a look so loud it deserved subtitles. I leaned back. Thank you for saying the quiet part in front of dessert. Peter froze, realizing the sentence had escaped him. Sandra's face changed entirely. Not shock, calculation updating. You expected inheritance, she said. We all did. No, Rebecca snapped. Some of us expected manners. A surprising ally, but I accepted all weather. Daniel Levin folded his hands. For legal precision, expectation is not entitlement. Stay out of this, Peter barked. I was invited, Daniel replied. Greg laughed into his napkin. I decided to move matters along. Peter, here are your options. He stared at me as if I had become another species. Option 1, repay the loan in full. Sandra actually snorted. Reasonable response. Option 2, refinance and buy out my secured interest. More silence. Option 3, sell the property, satisfy debt, and keep whatever remains. Sandra gripped the table edge. You would throw your own family out? I met her eyes. You have rehearsed that line beautifully while forgetting where I sleep. She reddened. My children grew up here. So did my humiliation. Mia whispered, oh my God. Kyle whispered back, write that down. Good grandchildren again. Peter pointed at Daniel. You can't enforce this after 21 years. Daniel answered calmly. We can discuss tolling, acknowledgments, continued occupancy benefit, and trigger clauses if you'd like. Peter stared blankly. Meaning yes, Daniel added. Helpful man. Rebecca rose and began pacing now. So Mom has nearly $500,000 plus a $600,000 claim? Yes, I said. And you stayed in that little suite? Yes. Why? There it was. The question no one had asked because the answer accused them all. I looked around the table. At first, because grief made me tired. I looked at Peter. Then because your father had just died and you cried in my kitchen saying you'd lose everything. At Sandra. Then because you were pregnant and frightened. At Mia and Kyle. Then because children need stability. At everyone. And later, because I became convenient. No one moved. No one chewed. No one defended themselves because truth had occupied all chairs. Sandra's voice came smaller now. We didn't mean... Yes, I said gently. You did, you just didn't examine it. She looked down. Peter sat again heavily. What do you want, at last? The real question, not what can I take. What do you want? I let the moment breathe, then answered carefully. I want respect. He laughed bitterly. That's not a legal remedy. No, Daniel said. But it often reduces damages. Even I smiled. I also want choices, I continued. Real ones, Sandra asked quietly, meaning I may leave, I may stay. I may buy a cottage and fill it with jazz musicians. I may travel. I may hire a cook who insults people selectively. Kyle nearly choked. Mia covered her mouth. Peter rubbed his face. So this is revenge? No, I said. Revenge is emotional, this is administrative. Daniel looked openly delighted now. I handed Peter another folder. Inside were printed apartment listings. Luxury senior residences, independent condos, townhouses near the river, and one modest bungalow with a greenhouse. I've been browsing, I said. For yourself, Rebecca asked. For whichever of us moves first. Sandra shot upright. Excuse me, I'm simply planning futures I learned from experts. That landed beautifully. Sandra stood. I am not being mocked in my own home. I looked around the dining room. Are you sure? She stormed into the kitchen. Cupboards opened aggressively. Peter made no move to follow. Interesting. Mia finally spoke. Grandma, are you really going to make them sell? I turned to her. No, darling, I am going to make them choose honestly. She nodded slowly. Kyle asked if they sell. Can I live with you? Depends, I said. Do you load dishwashers correctly? Emotionally, yes, promising answer. Rebecca sat again and studied me with new eyes. I don't know you at all, I softened. You knew the useful version. That hurt her. Good, growth often begins there. Sandra returned carrying a pie server like a weapon and set dessert down far too hard. Apple pie, my recipe, naturally. No one moved toward it. I took the server, cut myself a generous slice, and placed it on my plate. Then I looked at the room. Well, I said. Nothing improves negotiations like cinnamon. I ate the first bite in complete silence, while my family stared at collapsed illusions and warm pastry. Then Peter said the one sentence I had waited 21 years to hear. Mom, what would it take to make this right? I set down my fork, not dramatically. Simply with the care due to important moments and flaky crust. What would it take to make this right? Peter repeated. Interesting how some sentences arrive decades late and still expect immediate service. I looked at him carefully. My son had aged during dinner. Not physically, though there was that too. He looked like a man seeing himself from outside for the first time and disliking the angle. Sandra stood rigid near the sideboard, arms folded around pride like a shawl. Rebecca watched me with naked curiosity. Mia and Kyle had forgotten dessert entirely. Daniel Levin waited the way surgeons do before someone chooses anesthesia. What would it take? I said softly. Yes, to begin or to finish, he blinked. What? Making things right is not one task, it is a staircase. He glanced involuntarily toward the hallway stairs leading to my suite. Good. Let architecture teach. I don't know what that means, he muttered. That has been central to the problem. I rose and walked to the window. Outside, the backyard glowed under string lights Sandra insisted made the house look expensive. I had paid for those too, indirectly. When your father died, I said without turning, I was 52. The room stilled. I had just learned where he hid spare batteries, but not where grief hides. No one spoke. You came to me shaking. You said the mortgage on your first place was impossible, your job uncertain, Sandra pregnant, and you were scared. Peter swallowed. I remember. I sold the only home I ever chose with him. I turned. I handed you the future I had planned for myself. Sandra's eyes lowered. Peter whispered, I know. No, I said. You know now, different tense. Daniel nodded slightly, perhaps at grammar, perhaps at justice. I returned to my chair. So here is the staircase. I held up one finger. First. Truth spoken plainly in this house. Peter nodded quickly. I'm sorry. I raised a hand. That is fog, truth. He closed his eyes, then said it. I took your help and turned it into entitlement. The room shifted. Better. Again. I let Sandra insult you because confronting her cost me comfort. Sandra inhaled sharply. He did not look at her. Again. I kept you in that suite because it was financially convenient. Mia began crying quietly. I ignored it kindly. Tears are not always emergencies. Again, I pretended the house was mine alone because admitting otherwise made me feel small. There, the beam under the floorboards, I nodded. Good, step one. I raised a second finger. Second. Apologies without theater. He looked confused. You apologized to me privately later. You apologize to your children now. He turned to Mia first. I lied about tuition. She nodded once through tears. To Kyle, I made jokes about grandma that taught disrespect. Kyle looked at the table. Yeah, to Rebecca. I took loans and let you believe I'd repay them. Rebecca gave a dry laugh. I did know that one. Healthy family moment. He finally looked at Sandra. Silence thickened. I let us become ugly, he said. Not enough, but not nothing. Sandra's face tightened. Then, to my surprise, she spoke first. I was cruel because it felt efficient. Every head turned. She continued staring at the sideboard. You were there. You were available. You were easier to criticize than our debt, marriage, or fear. Now that was a sentence with blood in it. I felt something inside me unclench 1 degree. She looked at me then. I am sorry, Margaret. No smile, no joke, no witness management tone. Interesting, I nodded once. Step 1 for you also, third finger. Third, structural change. Peter frowned. What does that mean? It means apologies without inconvenience are decorations. Daniel actually murmured, excellent. I continued. This property will be professionally valued. Sandra opened her mouth. I raised a finger. Careful, I'm enjoying authority. She closed it. The loan balance will be renegotiated into reality, not fantasy. I do not require $600,000. I require fairness. Peter nearly sagged with relief. I had not finished. In exchange, the deed will be amended. Now Sandra did speak. To include you? No, to include me and remove Peter, Rebecca guessed, suddenly entertained. No, I smiled. To include all 3 generations in trust form, with occupancy conditions and sale restrictions. Blank stares, Daniel translated. She means none of you may treat this house like a private piggy bank ever again. Useful man. Mia whispered, Grandma is terrifyingly smart. Kyle whispered back, I'm getting that on a shirt. I raised a 4th finger. 4th, my suite becomes mine legally and physically. Separate entrance renovated, full kitchen, laundry restored, no permission windows. Sandra reddened. Peter nodded immediately. Yes, plus monthly housekeeping. Sandra looked outraged. I looked delighted. Problem? No, she said tightly. Wonderful, 5th finger. 5th, Sunday dinner rotates. Confusion, I explained. I cooked for 21 years while being diminished. Now I dine, Kyle grinned. I can cook pasta. Noted, Rebecca said. I order beautifully. Rejected. Even Sandra smiled despite herself, then I lowered my hand. 6th and final. The room leaned unconsciously. I am taking a 3-month trip to Europe in spring. Chaos. What? Alone? With who? You hate travel. You never said. I let them sputter, then sipped water. I dislike travel when exhausted and funding others. Peter stared. You're serious? Yes, I can't believe you planned this. No, I said, I postponed it. That sentence entered the room like sunlight. Mia cried harder, happy tears this time. Kyle stood and hugged me from behind awkwardly. You're insane, he said. I raised your father, obviously. Laughter broke at last, real laughter, even Peter, even Sandra, though cautiously. Daniel closed his briefcase. My work here appears annoyingly hopeful. We ate pie then. Actual pie. Warm, cinnamon-heavy, unweaponized. Conversation came strange and tender in patches. Mia asked where in Europe. Kyle offered to teach me travel apps. Rebecca admitted she always wanted to see Florence. Sandra asked quietly if I preferred gas or induction for my renovated kitchen. Growth can sound ridiculous at first. When plates were cleared and guests drifted home, Peter knocked on my suite door around 11. I opened. He stood alone. No performance left, just tired son. Mom, he said. Yes. Then he began to cry the way he had at 8 over a dead squirrel. No strategy in it, just grief. I'm sorry I became someone you had to correct legally. I touched his cheek. So am I. We stood there a long time in the doorway between what had been and what might still be repaired. Then I said the most loving thing available. Call the contractor tomorrow. Contractors arrived Monday at 8:30. Nothing heals denial like men with measuring tapes. Sandra opened the front door in silk pajamas and visible resentment. 3 strangers entered carrying tool bags, ladders, and the serene indifference of people paid by the hour. I stood in the hallway with coffee. Good morning, I said. The foreman, a broad woman named Teresa with steel gray hair and forearms that suggested truth had weight, consulted her clipboard. Rear suite renovation, laundry install, kitchen expansion, private entrance refresh, accessibility upgrades, and interior soundproofing. She looked at me. You, Margaret, yes, you're my favorite kind of client. What kind? The one paying with revenge energy. I loved her instantly. Peter emerged from the stairs half-dressed, blinking. Today, yes, I said, I find momentum medicinal. He rubbed his face. We didn't even discuss budget. I did with myself. Sandra muttered something about chaos. Teresa heard it. Ma'am, she said pleasantly, chaos is unlicensed wiring. This is improvement. Then she sent 2 men to remove the stacked storage shelves blocking my separate entrance door. I had forgotten there was once a door there. Interesting what families bury. Within hours, walls were opened, pipes exposed, and 21 years of inconvenience translated into dust. My old washing machine line, intentionally capped, a vent redirected away from my suite, insulation removed between walls for easier cable runs, meaning easier surveillance of sound. Sandra became pale, Peter became quieter. I became energized enough to alphabetize spices. By Wednesday, Teresa found something else. "Margaret," she called from the rear hallway. We stood looking at a narrow cavity inside the wall where the shelves had been. There sat an envelope wrapped in wax paper. Thomas's handwriting, for when they renovate badly. I nearly laughed myself weak. Inside was a folded note and a small velvet pouch. The note read, "If you're finding this, they ignored my instructions and probably your comfort. Use the enclosed wisely. Love." Inside the pouch lay my diamond anniversary ring. I had searched for it for years after Thomas died. Peter said perhaps it was lost during the move. Sandra suggested maybe I misplaced it in grief. No, Thomas hid it in the wall, likely because he suspected someday I'd need reminding that value can be hidden safely until timing improves. I slipped it onto my finger, still fit. Teresa whistled softly. "Your husband planned like a criminal mastermind." "No," I said. "Like a husband with siblings." Word spread through the house quickly. Rebecca came by after work to see the ring. Mia cried again. That child hydrated emotionally. Kyle asked if there were more treasure walls. Sandra said nothing at all. Good instinct. By Friday, the suite had doubled in spirit if not square footage. Counters installed. Washer and dryer ordered. Walk-in shower framed. French doors opening to the garden where storage junk once blocked light. I stood in the construction dust and felt absurdly rich. Not because of money. Because inconvenience was ending. Meanwhile, Daniel Levin worked the legal side with cheerful precision. The house was appraised. The trust structure drafted. Loan balance negotiated down to a realistic secured interest Peter could refinance over time. No sale required if payments were made and behavior maintained. Behavior maintained was my phrase, not legal language, but Daniel appreciated it. Sandra requested a private conversation on Saturday. I accepted because curiosity ages well. We sat on the patio among paint cans and tulips. She brought tea, store-bought, badly brewed but symbolic. "I owe you more than one apology," she began. "Yes," she almost smiled. "I used to think you judged me from the day I married Peter." "I did." That startled a laugh from her. "But not for the reasons you think," I added. She waited. "You were always efficient with people, warm when useful, sharp when inconvenient." She looked at her cup. "That's accurate." "Efficiency is excellent for laundry," I said. "Poor for love." She was quiet a long while, then said, "I grew up where weakness was expensive." There it was, origins. Many unpleasant adults are simply children who built armor and forgot to remove it indoors. "My father left debts," she continued. "My mother left fear." If someone wasn't pulling weight, they were a threat. I considered her, and I became unpaid furniture. She nodded with shame. "Yes, good, naming things matters." She looked up. "I don't know how to be softer." "Practice on service workers and grandchildren." That made her laugh properly. Then, unexpectedly, she cried. No mascara performance. Real tears, angry at themselves. "I loved having you there," she whispered. "I just hated needing you." Well, that was worth hearing. I reached across and patted her hand once. "Dependence humiliates proud people. Gratitude heals them," she nodded. From then on, Sandra changed in practical ways first, better than speeches. She knocked before entering my suite. Asked instead of assigned, returned dishes washed, stopped using my full name like a complaint. Growth often wears plain clothes. Spring came early. My renovated suite was finished by March. Teresa handed me the final keys with ceremony. "Independent kingdom," she said. The new kitchen gleamed. Laundry hummed. Sunlight poured through the doors. My own little library wall overlooked the garden, and the soundproofing was excellent. I tested it by singing terribly. No one complained. At Sunday dinner that week, I made an announcement. "I leave for Europe in 3 weeks." Peter nodded sadly. Sandra asked if I needed luggage. Rebecca demanded my itinerary. Mia offered airport rides. Kyle asked if he could house-sit the cool apartment. Then Peter said quietly, "I'm scared you won't come back." The room stilled. I answered honestly, "I am too." He looked stricken. Then I smiled. Because I may discover Paris suits me. Laughter returned, but his fear was real. Children sense when mothers stop orbiting them. The night before departure, I found another envelope slipped under my suite door. Thomas's handwriting again. Impossible man had apparently hidden half our marriage in paper. This one read, "For the day she finally leaves first." I sat on the bed with the envelope in my lap for nearly 10 minutes before opening it. Some loves deserve ceremony. The paper inside was cream-colored, folded twice, edges softened by time. Thomas's handwriting moved across it with the same patient confidence that once signed school forms, tax returns, apology notes after arguments, and birthday cards that always made me cry by line 3. My Margaret, if you are reading this, then one of two things has happened. Either I have become dramatic and hidden too many envelopes, or you are finally leaving first. I hope it is the second. You spent too much of your life arriving where others needed you. I loved that about you. I also worried about it. So if I am gone, and you are at last choosing yourself before the next request, then listen carefully. Do not apologize for joy. Do not explain rest. Do not shrink new happiness so old people feel comfortable. Eat the expensive dessert. Flirt badly. Take trains. If anyone says you are selfish now, remember how generously they used your unselfish years. And if Peter has become an idiot, forgive him slowly. Love always, Thomas. I laughed and cried in the same breath. Then I read it again. Then once more. By the third reading, I was no longer mourning him. I was being accompanied. The next morning, the house behaved as if royalty were traveling. Sandra packed sandwiches for the airport because terminal food is robbery. Rebecca printed backup itineraries color-coded by city. Mia bought me a neck pillow shaped like poor decisions. Kyle installed 6 tracking apps on my phone and 1 meditation app for emergencies. Peter carried my suitcase to the car and kept checking the handle like luggage might betray him. At the airport, he hugged me too long. I still can't believe you're doing this. I still can't believe I waited. He swallowed. I'll make the payments. You'll make the payments and the progress. Yes, Sandra kissed my cheek. Send kitchen photos from Europe. Only if yours stays clean, she laughed. Rebecca said, if you meet a wealthy widower, screen him. By debt ratio first, I replied. Daniel Levin, who had come simply to witness history and deliver one final folder, handed me a packet. What's this? Updated trust documents, emergency contacts, and a list of museums you'd insult me by missing. Useful man. Then I boarded. I had not flown alone in 37 years. The first hour I was terrified. The second hour I was curious. By landing, I was younger. Paris in spring smells like rain, coffee, old stone, and confidence. I rented a small apartment with blue shutters and a balcony too narrow for prudence. I ate pastries before noon. I walked until my feet complained in 3 languages. I sat in museums beside paintings that looked more emotionally complicated than my family and therefore restful. I learned to order wine without sounding apologetic. I bought scarves I did not need. I flirted badly with a retired architect named Luke who admired my ring and respected its history. Thomas would have approved the bad flirting. From Paris, I went to Florence, then Vienna, then Prague. Then a small village in Portugal, where I accidentally stayed 2 extra weeks because the owner's mother liked me and fed me sea bass. I sent postcards constantly. To Peter, the cathedral here is older than your excuses. To Sandra, European butter would humble your pastries. To Rebecca, met a banker more dangerous than you. To Mia, nurses are saints. Sleep more. To Kyle, no, I will not start a travel vlog. And one to Daniel Levin, no lawsuits yet. Architecture excellent. Back home, changes continued. Peter made every payment on time. Sandra started a small catering business, and to everyone's surprise except mine, was excellent at it. Efficiency redirected can become talent. Rebecca downsized, divorced properly, and began volunteering at a debt counseling clinic where arrogant professionals met arithmetic. Mia graduated nursing school. Kyle stopped saying bro around me after I fined him $5 per usage. I stayed gone 4 months. then 5, then 6, because returning by schedule felt suspiciously like old habits. When I finally came home in October, the house looked the same and entirely different. The front garden was trimmed, the back patio repainted, my suite glowing warm through the windows. And waiting in the driveway were all of them. Peter first, older somehow, better too. He hugged me and whispered, "Welcome home." Not back, home, important distinction. Sandra handed me a tray of mini pastries with professional pride. Rebecca carried flowers. Mia cried immediately. Kyle saluted for reasons unclear. Inside, the dining room table was set. Candles. China, flowers, my china. No one had to be reminded. Dinner was loud, imperfect, affectionate, and occasionally ridiculous. At one point, Peter stood and tapped his glass. "I need to say something," the room quieted. He looked at me, not theatrically but steadily. "I thought success meant owning things," he swallowed. "I thought being the man of the house meant control." Sandra reached for his hand. "I thought help received long ago became irrelevant." He looked around the table. "I was wrong about almost everything that mattered." Then he looked back at me. "Thank you for not giving up on me when I deserved distance." I held his gaze. "You received both." Laughter broke the tension kindly. He nodded. "Fair." Then he lifted a small envelope. "Oh no," Rebecca said. "We inherited Dad's envelope disease." He smiled. "This one is from us." Inside was a deed amendment packet. Finalized. My lifetime occupancy secured, trust structure complete, and one additional page. A title transfer for the small bungalow with greenhouse I had once admired in listings. I stared. "What is this?" Sandra answered first. "Your winter house." Mia cried harder. Kyle said, "I call the greenhouse couch." Rebecca smiled. "We all pitched in." Peter spoke quietly. "You spent decades giving us starts. We thought maybe it was time you got another one." I could not speak. At my age, tears arrive less often but mean more. I finally managed. "This is too much." Thomas's words came back instantly. "Do not apologize for joy," so I corrected myself. "This is lovely." That winter I divided time between the suite and the bungalow. Spring in Europe, summer with family, autumn in the greenhouse. A life with chapters instead of chores. Years later, when younger women asked how I became brave enough to start over in my 70s, I always told them the truth. My family called me broke and useless. Then my husband's envelopes started opening.